So this is my third and final video, I guess, on my little intro to the theory of structural dissociation, if that's what I'm doing, I guess. I got some really positive interaction and engagement with the past two videos, which is awesome because that's why I made them. So I figured I'd wrap it up here with part 3 about why I think it's so important for more people to be talking about this and for more people to know about it. Obviously, I have some skin in the game. As I've said previously, I've been diagnosed with severe dissociative disorder, so I do fall on the far end of the structural dissociation continuum. I am a structurally dissociated individual, so, obviously the topic's going to feel important to me. But there are other reasons that I wanted to share. And the first one is that structural dissociation, and in particular dissociative disorders, which is, I'm referring to like DID, OSDD 1A and 1B. When I reference that, that's falling into your tertiary structural dissociation. That stuff's actually a lot less rare than most people think. It's not this, 1 in a million bizarre, crazy, let's make another movie about it thing to have DID, actually. It's hard to get exact estimates on how many people have what psychiatric condition that's kind of just inherent. But best estimates right now are at about 1.5% of the global population, which is in the ballpark of the relative prevalency of autism. It's a little less, but it's really pretty close. So chances are, if you've met someone with autism, you've met someone with DID, and you might just not know it. You probably don't know it. They might not even know it. And I think it's important for people to know that they are not this super, super bizarre, totally unheard of thing, because I think it gets in the way of a lot of people considering whether or not it might apply to them. It definitely did for me. It's hard to look at descriptions of a condition that's been sensationalized that way, and even let yourself consider it applying to you, even in part. As I mentioned in past videos, structural dissociation doesn't just refer to severe dissociative disorders like that. Complex PTSD, borderline personality disorder, even simple PTSD fall along that continuum. But the idea that structural dissociation, which people have kind of linked to be synonymous with this concept of DID, is super rare, makes it hard to just look at it objectively and consider whether or not maybe you fall somewhere along there, not necessarily way at the end. And why does that matter so much? That is my point too, which is that if you are someone with trauma and you are structurally dissociated and you don't know it, a lot of the common types of treatment for trauma are not only going to be ineffective for you, they're actually going to be counterproductive. This is something that happened to me personally. I was first diagnosed with complex PTSD in 2020, and traditionally for that you go through some talk therapy and EMDR, things to process the trauma, which is great for people who don't have a high level of dissociation, especially structural dissociation going on. If you do and you don't know it, like me at the time, digging in too quick to that trauma and trying to process it is actually going to set you way back. For me personally, I started EMDR, and after like maybe 3 sessions, I don't remember the next month of my life, pretty much. I know I was almost hospitalized. There was severe concern for my safety. I wasn't allowed to drive, leave the home by myself. I just was not there. Like, the lights were on. Don't know what was going on. Still don't really have answers for it, but it was part of the structural dissociation. It was a dissociative defense against digging into that stuff that my brain just wasn't ready for, which it's really important to know about a person before you try digging at that stuff. Ideally, therapists are going to be looking out for that. They're going to be screening for that. But, the world isn't perfect. And structural dissociation is really easy to miss when you're looking at yourself, or even for professionals who should be or are trained in it. It's kind of necessarily usually a pretty covert process because it's designed to protect you from being aware of something. So being aware of even that defense mechanism can be really difficult. So that's why I think it's really important that people are aware of the model and have at least considered whether or not they could fall somewhere in that area before they jump into trying to process trauma that might set them way back in their healing when they're just trying to live their best life. And my third point about this basically is just reducing stigma. Mental health stigma in general, I know, is a thing. I've worn a ton of different diagnoses over the past decade and a half. I've faced a lot of different kinds of stigma for different things that I thought I had, or that people, my doctors thought I had. But I can tell you that the stigma around like dissociative disorders like mine is a whole other beast. It's pretty wild. And I've never really been as reluctant or honestly like kind of ashamed to admit that I'm diagnosed with something as I have been about this, because of the reaction that people tend to have and all of the misinformation and like sensationalizing of these disorders that's out there. It doesn't look like the movie Split, people. It's almost never even that overt and noticeable. Doesn't make you a villain. It's not even like that bizarre of a concept to wrap your head around once you become familiar with like why it happens, how it happens, what it looks like. Structural dissociation, the entire model. Even learning just kind of the basics takes away that like shock and awe and disbelief and just like hush hush that only happens once in a decade, and we have to do 3 BBC specials about it every time. And removing that stigma around it, I think, would help a lot of people to be able to recognize the signs within themselves, not necessarily of a severe dissociative disorder, but just of structural dissociation as a concept, which is just the product of trauma. And nobody should have to be like so ashamed and afraid of admitting to themselves or others that like they've been impacted by trauma. It's not your fault. It's not my fault that I went through the things I did. And I feel like if everyone just knew a little bit more about this, and we could take away some of these crazy ideas that we have about this not all that uncommon defense mechanism that brains come up with in the face of trauma, traumatized individuals would be a lot better off. So that's pretty much what I have to say about that. And thanks for engaging, and as always, look into structural dissociation a little more. I'm not an expert, just a person who has it, and who thinks more people should know. So